Her parents sold their child because of her autism, until a lonely rancher took her in. A chilling truth, whispered in the hushed halls of desperation, yet its reverberations echoed across barren plains, striking the heart with the force of a hammer on an anvil. Before we delve into this harrowing tale, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And subscribe if you want more content like this one. This was not a story of a child lost to the woods, but to the crushing weight of expectation, to the cold arithmetic of convenience. Ilara, a name whispered with a certain fragile reverence by the few who knew her, was deemed an inconvenient truth, a burden too heavy for shoulders already slumped beneath the world's perceived judgments. Her parents, figures etched in the narrative with the sharp, unyielding lines of desperation, had made a choice that severed the most sacred of bonds. They had mistaken difference for deficiency, a unique constellation of stars for an empty sky. The air around them, thick with unarticulated anxieties, often pressed down upon Ilara, making even the simplest breath a monumental effort. Her world was a kaleidoscope of overwhelming sensations, a symphony of sounds and colors that most processed as background hum, but for her, it was a crashing crescendo, often demanding retreat into the quiet sanctity of her own mind. This retreat, misinterpreted as defiance or detachment, only fueled the growing resentment, the quiet desperation that festered within the small, cramped confines of their home. There was a palpable tension that hung in the air, a metallic taste of unspoken words and simmering frustrations, culminating in a decision born not of malice, but of a profound, tragic failure to understand. The path to this ultimate severance was paved with countless missed cues, averted gazes, and the slow erosion of patience, until all that remained was a stark, transactional agreement, cloaked in the guise of providing better care, a phrase that itself hung heavy with irony, a cruel mockery of genuine compassion. It was a dark, hushed bargain, sealed not with a handshake, but with the profound, devastating silence of a child about to be cast adrift. The world outside their door seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable, for the moment when a young life, vibrant yet misunderstood, would be exchanged for the quiet solace of an imagined normalcy. Her very existence, a testament to the boundless variations of the human spirit, had become, in their eyes, a problem to be solved, a challenge to be outsourced, reducing a complex, living soul to a mere liability. The gravel crunched beneath the tires of the battered pickup truck, a sound amplified in the vast, desolate quiet of the ranch. Silas, a man forged from the same rough earth as his sprawling property, stood by the porch, his silhouette stark against the fading amber light of dusk. His face, weathered by sun and solitude, was a map of unspoken hardships, his eyes a distant, unreadable gray. When the back door of the truck opened, and a small, slender figure emerged, it was as if a bird had been released into a lion's den, vulnerable and out of place. Ilara, clutching a worn fabric doll, peered out from beneath a curtain of dark hair, her gaze flitting, seeking anchor in a world suddenly devoid of familiar contours. She did not cry, not then, but a silent tremor ran through her small frame, a profound internal scream that no one heard. Her parents, quick to offer strained pleasantries and even quicker to depart, left her there, a child abandoned to a stranger, under the immense, indifferent sky. Silas watched their dust trail recede, a silent judgment hanging in the air, thick and acrid. He was not a man given to grand gestures or tender words. His life had been a series of hard knocks, each one driving him further into himself, cultivating a rugged independence that bordered on reclusion. He had agreed to take her in for reasons he hadn't fully articulated, even to himself. A vague sense of duty, perhaps, or a fleeting echo of a past responsibility, long buried. But seeing her now, so small, so utterly adrift, a knot tightened in his gut. This was not a business arrangement. This was a life, fragile and entrusted into his gruff, calloused hands. The silence between them was immense, weighted with the unspoken narratives of their respective lives, the chasm of their unfamiliarity stretching wide. Ilara's senses, already heightened, absorbed every detail, the dry scent of dust and hay, the distant lowing of cattle, the rustle of wind through brittle grass, each sensation a jolt to her fragile composure. Silas, observing her stillness, her almost painful sensitivity to the environment, felt a flicker of something akin to unease, an unfamiliar emotion in his otherwise predictable world. He was used to the straightforward needs of animals, the unambiguous demands of the land. A child, especially this child, was a mystery, a complex equation he feared he was ill-equipped to solve. He cleared his throat, the sound rough and ill-suited to the delicate moment, and gestured vaguely towards the house, the vastness of the landscape mirroring the vastness of the task ahead. The days that followed blurred into a tense, unsettling rhythm. Ilara, like a creature of the wild, remained wary, her movements hesitant, her eyes perpetually scanning. The ranch, with its sprawling spaces and raw, untamed energy, was a constant assault on her senses. The clang of metal against stone, the persistent hum of the generator, the sharp, pungent scent of manure, all these ordinary elements coalesced into a jarring, overwhelming cacophony within her highly attuned perception. She struggled with routines, with the expectation of interaction, preferring the solace of solitary corners, of tracing patterns in the dust with a twig, or watching the way light fractured through the leaves of the lone, gnarled oak by the creek. Silas, for his part, was a man of habit, his days dictated by the unforgiving demands of the land and livestock. He moved through his tasks with an almost mechanical precision, his initial attempts at connection with Ilara clumsy, often misinterpreted. He would offer her food, a simple plate of stew or bread, only for her to recoil from the unfamiliar texture, the mixed smells. His gruff inquiries about her well-being were met with silence, or a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. He was not unkind, not deliberately, but his kindness was born of duty, not understanding, a rough, unpolished gem that failed to catch the light in Ilara's shadowed world. He often found himself watching her from a distance, a strange mix of frustration and bewildered curiosity stirring within him. He saw the way she would sit for hours by the watering trough, simply observing the insects, or the peculiar fascination she held for the glint of sunlight on a discarded piece of metal. These moments, quiet and unassuming, chipped away at his preconceived notions, revealing glimpses of a mind that operated on a different frequency, not broken, but uniquely tuned. He was used to fixing things that were broken, to mending fences and patching roofs. This was different. This was about learning, about adjusting his own lens to perceive a world that existed just beyond the periphery of his comprehension. The vastness of the ranch, once a symbol of his solitude, now felt like a stage for this unexpected, silent drama, each day a new scene in a story whose plot was still profoundly unclear, the tension between them a palpable, living thing, breathing in the dry, dusty air. Then came the day of the mare. A skittish young horse newly arrived had panicked in the corral, rearing and whinnying, its fear spreading like wildfire through the other animals. Silas, swift and practiced, moved to calm it, but the mare was agitated beyond his usual methods. Ilara, who had been sitting quietly by the fence, unnoticed, suddenly rose. She did not approach directly, nor did she speak. Instead, she began to hum, a low, resonant note that seemed to vibrate in the very air, simple and pure. Her eyes, usually darting, settled on the mare, wide and unblinking, filled not with fear, but with an uncanny stillness. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the mare's frantic movements lessened. Its ears, initially pinned back, began to twitch, then softened. Ilara's humming continued, a steady, melodic drone, and as if by an invisible thread, the mare lowered its head, exhaling a long, trembling breath. Silas, halted in his tracks, watched the impossible unfold. He had never seen anything like it. This child, who recoiled from human touch, who struggled with the simplest commands, possessed an innate, profound connection to the animal world, an intuitive understanding that bypassed words entirely. It was a moment of profound revelation, a small yet seismic shift in his perception. He saw, for the first time, not a burden, but a being of unexpected grace, a unique strength residing within her quiet exterior. A ghost of a memory, fleeting and indistinct, brushed against his mind. A child's laughter, a tiny hand reaching for a horse's muzzle, a scene from a lifetime ago, tinged with an unbearable ache of loss. He pushed it away, but the seed was planted. Ilara was not merely present, she was here, a vibrant, essential part of the landscape, a key to a world he had long since forgotten how to truly see. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and fiery orange, casting long, dramatic shadows across the ranch. In that fading light, for the briefest of moments, the chasm between them seemed to narrow, bridged by a silent, shared understanding, a fragile thread woven from a mare's fear and a child's song, hinting at a connection far deeper than mere circumstance. The incident with the mare became a quiet turning point, a subtle shift in the gravitational pull of their solitary lives. Silas, though still a man of few words, began to observe Ilara with a new kind of attention, a watchful, almost protective gaze. He started leaving her bowls of water near the fence line where she often sat, or placing a small, smooth stone she had admired on the porch steps. These were not grand gestures, but for Silas, they were monumental concessions, acts of a man slowly dismantling the fortress around his heart. He learned her rhythms, the times of day she preferred the quiet of her room, the specific textures she found comforting, the precise, almost ritualistic way she arranged her few possessions. He discovered that her apparent aloofness was a shield, a necessary barrier against a world that constantly threatened to overwhelm her. He began to communicate not through demands but through example, showing her the patterns of ranch life, letting her observe him as he tended to the livestock, mended fences, or rode out across the vast plains. And Ilara in turn began to tentatively unfurl. She would follow him at a distance, a small shadow in his wake, occasionally mimicking his movements, a subtle nod to the burgeoning trust between them. She found solace in the predictable patterns of the animals, their honest needs, their unambiguous responses. The ranch, once a place of jarring sensations, slowly transformed into a sanctuary, its vastness now offering not loneliness, but space to simply be. Yet a shadow lingered. Silas's past, like the deep-etched lines on his face, remained largely unaddressed, a closed book he rarely opened. There were moments, fleeting and sharp, when a certain look in Ilara's eyes, a particular gesture would trigger a flash of something painful within him, a memory tantalizingly close, yet stubbornly out of reach. He saw the way she would trace the faded photograph on his mantelpiece, a picture of a young woman with a kind smile, her eyes holding a familiar light. He would quickly move to obscure it, a small, almost imperceptible flinch. The old ranch foreman, a man named Jed, who occasionally rode in from the nearest town, would eye Ilara with a mixture of suspicion and pity, muttering about folks who don't know their place, reflecting the societal biases Silas had, perhaps unknowingly, internalized and then, through Ilara, begun to challenge. The quiet, profound transformation occurring on this isolated ranch was a defiance of the world's harsh judgments, a testament to the unexpected blossoming of human connection in the most unlikely of soils. The fragile peace of the ranch was shattered one late afternoon by the arrival of a sleek, expensive car, incongruous against the dusty backdrop. A man in a tailored suit, a woman in an equally refined dress emerged, their polished demeanor a stark contrast to the rough-hewn reality of Silas's world. They were Ilara's biological parents, a sudden, unwelcome intrusion from a past Silas had desperately tried to shield her from. Their appearance sparked a primal surge of anger within him, a protectiveness he hadn't known he possessed. They spoke in smooth, practiced tones, rehearsed words about checking in, about Ilara's welfare, but their eyes held a detached concern, a performative empathy that rang hollow in the vast, honest silence of the plains. Ilara, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, retreated, her small body stiffening, her gaze fixed on the ground. The air crackled with unspoken accusations, with the weight of their abandonment. Silas, his voice a low rumble, confronted them, his terse words cutting through their carefully constructed facade. "What do you want?" he demanded. No preamble, no niceties. This confrontation unearthed a deeper, more profound pain within Silas, stirring long, dormant memories. Flashback. The image blurred, then sharpened. A small wooden toy horse, meticulously carved, lying shattered on the floor. A young woman, her face pale, tear-streaked, turning away from him, her words a bitter echo in the empty room. You were never here, Silas. Not when it mattered. Not for her. The her was unseen, unheard, a ghost in the periphery, but her absence was a gaping wound. Silas had been consumed by the ranch, by the unforgiving demands of the land, by a silent battle against a debt that threatened to swallow him whole. He had believed providing material security was enough, that his constant grueling labor was an act of love. He had been wrong. The woman, his sister, had left, taking her child, his niece, with her. A child he had barely known, a life he had been too blind to truly see. He had learned of her passing years later, a quiet tragedy, the child's fate left unspoken, a mystery that gnawed at the edges of his soul. The flashback faded, leaving Silas with a familiar ache, a raw regret that mirrored Alara's present abandonment. He now understood the depth of his own past failure, the irony of his current role. He stood before Alara's parents, not just as her protector, but as a man haunted by his own inability to truly see and nurture a child who needed him. The tension in the dusty ranch yard was a living entity, threatening to choke them all, as the weight of two histories, separate yet entwined by the bitter threads of neglect and misunderstanding, pressed down upon the present moment, promising an inevitable, painful reckoning. The facade of pleasantries finally crumbled, revealing the raw, ugly truth beneath. Alara's parents, pressed by Silas's unwavering stare and blunt questions, began to unravel. Their initial polite inquiries about Alara's progress morphed into thinly veiled frustrations about her condition, their voices edged with a resentment they could no longer conceal. They spoke of the societal pressures, the whispered judgments from friends and family, the perceived burden of raising a child who did not conform to their meticulously crafted image of perfection. They had believed in their warped self-justification that sending Alara away was an act of mercy, a way to grant her a life they felt incapable of providing, a life free from their own limitations. The irony was a bitter taste in the air. Their limitations were not financial or logistical, but emotional, a profound inability to embrace a love that required unconditional acceptance. Silas, listening to their carefully constructed narrative of victimhood, felt a cold fury simmer within him. He saw in their eyes the same fear, the same inadequacy that had driven him to neglect his own niece, to prioritize the tangible over the intangible, the land over human connection. His own past failure now magnified their current one, creating a devastating echo of regret. He saw Alara perched on the porch steps, small and still, her head cocked slightly, absorbing the sharp nuances of the argument, her silent presence a powerful accusation. The parents, growing increasingly agitated, began to speak of a new opportunity for Alara, a specialized institution that promised integration and normalcy, words that rang like a death knell in Silas's ears. It was a thinly veiled attempt to reclaim control, to silence the gnawing guilt, to finally rid themselves of the problem they had so callously discarded. Silas's flaws were undeniable, his gruffness, his solitude, his past neglect, but in this moment his love for Alara, raw and fiercely protective, shone through, a beacon in the gathering dusk. He understood, with a clarity that cut him to the bone, that this was not about Alara's welfare, but about their own fragile peace of mind, built upon the foundation of her absence. The air thrummed with the escalating tension, the quiet ranch suddenly a crucible, where the depths of human selfishness and the nascent strength of unexpected love were tested, their narratives hurtling towards a collision that seemed both inevitable and terrifying. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery, bruised hues, as the confrontation reached its harrowing peak. Alara's mother, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and feigned exasperation, finally blurted out the full, devastating truth, not as a confession, but as a desperate plea for understanding. We couldn't do it, Silas. We just couldn't. It was always too much, the doctors, the schools, the way she just wasn't like other children. We wanted a normal life, a family that fit, and then the accident with our son. She was there, Silas, she saw it, and she didn't react like a child should. She just watched. We thought maybe she was broken, maybe she didn't feel anything. We had to protect ourselves, our other children, from from that. The words hung in the air, grotesque in their raw selfishness, a testament to a parent's terrifyingly misplaced priorities. The accident. The other child. This was the missing piece. The tragic catalyst that had pushed their fear and misunderstanding into full-blown abandonment. Ilara's father, his face ashen, corroborated the tale, his eyes pleading for a shred of absolution. We thought she was cursed, a burden. We tried to find someone who could truly understand her, a place where she could be cared for, far away from the pain she reminded us of. It was a confession twisted by fear, and a horrifying misinterpretation of Ilara's unique neurological wiring, transforming her stillness into coldness, her processing into indifference. Silas stood before them, a towering figure against the fading light, the weight of their words crushing him. The irony of their revelation was a bitter bile in his throat. They had cast her out because she was different, because she didn't react in a way they understood, echoing the societal prejudice that had driven his own sister away. The true emotional climax wasn't just their abandonment, but the chilling realization of their utterly self-serving justification, layered with the deep, unaddressed trauma of their other child's accident. Ilara, still on the porch, began to hum, a low, keening sound that pierced the tense silence, a mournful, wordless lament that spoke volumes. It was not a sign of indifference, but of a profound, visceral understanding of the raw human anguish unfolding before her, a stark contrast to her parents' detached narrative. In that moment, Silas saw not just their callousness, but the monstrous fear that had twisted their love, and he knew, with a fierce, protective certainty, that Ilara, far from being broken, was perhaps the most whole among them, capable of an empathy they could only dream of. The raw aftermath of the confrontation settled over the ranch like a suffocating dust storm. Ilara's parents, stripped bare of their carefully constructed pretenses, retreated in disarray, their polished vehicle vanishing into the darkening plains, leaving behind only a lingering scent of expensive regret. The silence they left in their wake was heavy, weighted with the echoes of their devastating admissions. Silas stood on the porch, his shoulders slumped, the weight of the revealed truths pressing down on him, not just Ilara's tragic history, but the mirrored shame of his own past. He had seen himself in their fear, in their inability to cope with what they didn't understand, in the desperate attempt to outsource their pain. But he had also seen, starkly contrasted, the path he had ultimately chosen, the path of acceptance, however gruffly offered. Ilara, for the first time since their arrival, looked directly at him, her wide, luminous eyes filled not with judgment, but with a profound, almost ancient understanding. Her hum had softened to a low, comforting drone, a balm to the raw wounds in the air. The dynamics between them had shifted irrevocably. The unspoken secrets, the mysteries of Silas's isolation and Ilara's abandonment, had been laid bare, exposing the vulnerable truths of their damaged lives. This was not a moment of easy forgiveness, but of a quiet, shared reckoning. The ranch, once a sanctuary born of circumstance, now felt like a crucible where their fractured souls were slowly, painstakingly reforged. Silas began to speak, his voice rough, halting, as he finally articulated the regret he had carried for decades, the unspoken story of his sister and niece, a tale of absence and misunderstanding that mirrored Ilara's own. He spoke not to justify, but to acknowledge, to lay bare his own flaws, his own journey from blindness to a hesitant, dawning sight. Ilara listened, not with words, but with her entire being, her stillness a testament to her profound capacity for absorption and empathy. The societal biases, the whispers of difference and burden that had driven her parents away, now seemed trivial, distant echoes against the vast, encompassing love that had, against all odds, taken root in this desolate place. The healing would be slow, arduous, but the truth, brutal as it was, had cleared the air, leaving space for a purer, more grounded connection. In the quiet aftermath, a new dawn broke over the ranch, tinged not with the sharp anxieties of the past, but with the soft promise of a future slowly unfolding. Ilara, no longer a child adrift, had found her anchor. The revelations had, paradoxically, brought a strange clarity, not just to Silas, but to Ilara herself. She understood in her unique sensory way the profound pain that had driven her parents, not excusing it, but seeing it for what it was, a desperate, misguided act born of fear and their own unhealed wounds. This understanding, though wordless, allowed her to release the silent tension that had always clung to her. She still hummed, still retreated into her private spaces, but now it was by choice, not out of fear or overwhelming sensory assault. She communicated in her own language, the gentle touch of her hand on Silas's arm when he was troubled, the careful placement of found objects, the spontaneous, joyous movements she made when in tune with the land or the animals. She flourished in the predictable rhythms of ranch life, finding solace and purpose in tending to the horses, in observing the intricate dance of nature. Her unique perspective, once dismissed as a deficiency, became a lens through which Silas, and through him, the quiet world of the ranch, saw beauty in the overlooked, meaning in the mundane. Silas, his gruff exterior softened by the profound experience of unconditional love, found a quiet redemption. He was no longer just a lonely rancher, but a guardian, a teacher, and in many ways, a student. He learned patience, true listening, and the myriad ways love could manifest beyond spoken words. The scars of his past, the regret of neglecting his niece remained, but they no longer defined him. Instead, they fueled his fierce devotion to Alara, transforming his solitary existence into one of profound purpose. The ranch, once a symbol of his isolation, became a testament to the transformative power of unexpected connection, a sanctuary where difference was not just tolerated, but celebrated. Alara, with her quiet strength and profound empathy, had shown him that family was not defined by blood, nor by societal expectations, but by the fierce, unwavering commitment to see, to accept, and to love another, exactly as they are. Their story was not one of miraculous cure, but of profound acceptance, a dark beginning giving way to a hopeful resolution, a quiet testament to the enduring regenerative power of true compassion in a world too often quick to discard what it fails to understand.